Hello, and welcome to the Battle of Cape Passaro. Now, this is going to be a slightly different introduction. And the reason it's going to be a slightly different introduction is it's going to be recorded in one. And I have been trying to get away from doing this recently. And the reason I've been trying to get away from doing recordings in one for introductions is because they are so long. However, for the Battle of Cape Passaro, this has become necessary for two reasons. One, you might hear axle grind, various grinding tools and power tools going on in the background at some point, because we're having building work finished off on the roof, and despite being entirely quiet for some reason, and most of the time, for some reason, in the last bit, it now involves a whole lot of power tools, and it's necessary, it's got to be done, but it means that I kept trying to put this off so that I would save it for when there wasn't any power tools, and the thing is, the power tools will get going. Secondly, it's boiling hot, and frankly, I want to get it done in one. And then I'm going to go and hide in a very, very cold shower. So, without much further ado, the Battle of Cape Passaro. And it is positioned exactly right to hide my head every time I do that. So, there are other names for the battle. The Battle of Avola or the Battle of Syracuse. Now, I do that, I can move this a lot closer. It actually took place on the 11th of August, 1718, so I'm actually going to be recording the introduction and the live 302 years to the day of the battle. It's a rather cool battle, and it's a rather reason, one of the reasons I have chosen this battle for today, because it is the 302nd anniversary. So let's start off by mentioning bilge pumps. Now, here's the thing. Bilge pumps is cool. This week, bilge pumps is going to be the small ships, and we'll even do the Albonia challenge. And it's worthwhile listening to because it seems to be predicting things before they happen. Aside from that, or we have governments now listening to us and going, "Ooh, they're right, we should do that." Considering how long governments take to write policy, I doubt that that's the case. But, you know, we can always dream. So, context. A little backstory to the Battle of Cape Passaro. You have the Peace of Utrecht in 1713 to 5. It basically takes 2 years to have a peace treaty. So those of you who start thinking, oh, it's only modern negotiations which take forever, it is not. It is very, very much negotiations have always taken for a long time, and the Treaty of Utrecht is exactly. Basically, King Louis XIV had long had a plan to unite Spain and France. He was going to achieve what the Habsburgs never had under the Bourbons. And interesting enough, the Bourbon line of Spain is the one that's kept going. The Bourbon line of France was, of course, cut off. But it was not successful. Because you have a 14-year-long war of Spanish succession, which started when Charles II, Habsburg king, dies. Yeah. So last week we were doing Philip II and his adventures, and how the Armada was really not the best idea since sliced bread for a king to launch, whose economy was absolutely thick. And this time now we have, oh good lord, we have Louis XIV and the last Habsburg king getting into in the same context. Now, pretty much Britain managed to organise an alliance and whips their behinds, excuse the French. And they gain, as part of the treaties, Gibraltar and Minorca. So, yeah, Treaty of Utrecht, that's where we get you, Gibraltar. And Britain basically managed to show it's now the big power on the world stage, because it can do what it likes. However, and you never guess with a name like Philip, he wasn't happy. He also has, strangely enough, an Italian wife and Italian First Minister, who, both of whom are also not happy about Spain losing its land into Italy. So Spain tried to recover its positions. Actually, in a later war, they will achieve this, but to some extent. In this one, they won't. Because at the same time as they try and achieve this, someone decides to plot against the French king, the young Duke d'Orleans, who's... Oh no, the Duke d'Orleans is, I think, the regent. I can never remember the king, what his title, the Duke at that time is, but he's about 5 years old. He really doesn't count. And so, he is the great-grandson of Louis XIV. And so a war begins. And Spain manages to unite thanks to the machinations of its ministers and their involvement in various stupid plans. Britain, France, and Netherlands and Austria against them. The Spanish are managing to pretty much sweep all before them. They've recovered as it begins Sardinia, Sicily, and Palermo. And Britain and Spain are not technically at war. And you have basically a scenario that the British sends a fleet. Now, here's the problem. There are two debates, we're going to get onto this. The British admiral has been pretty much ordered to destroy the Spanish, to stop the Spanish landing in Sicily, to stop the Spanish doing what they're planning on doing. However, there hasn't been a declaration of war. So, he can't really go in all guns blazing. He manages, though, to get the Spanish to fire at him first. According to all of the accounts he writes. The Spanish have accounts as well, but the trouble is they lose quite so many men, quite so many ships, quite so many things, that honestly you can't be that sure. So we're going to go with the British official account, which is they managed to provoke the Spanish into firing first by hassling them like... I don't know. How do I put this politely? Basically, they were doing the 18th century warship equivalent of stalking. Just giving their opponents even less personal space. This is Admiral Byng's fleet at Naples before the battle. It's big. I mean, it's really, really big. If Nelson had had the odds that Byng's going to enjoy at the Battle of Trafalgar, Nelson would have been crying with joy. If at any point in most of the Napoleonic Wars, Britain had had the odds which Byng will enjoy, the admirals would have been ecstatic. Now, yes, this is Admiral Byng. Not that admiral, though. His father. So we had Admiral of the Fleet George Byng. Notice normally I would say Vice Admiral of the Blue or something like that. Well, George Byng had already been the senior naval lord of the Admiralty, which is that period's title for the first Sea Lord. On 2 occasions, he would go back to become Lord of the Admiralty as a civil lord at certain points in his career. He is a very much a trusted pair of hands, and they have done the equivalent of today would be if the first Sea Lord was sent out to command you formed up such a large fleet of ships from reserve and from your main line that the only senior admiral you had to send out, senior enough and experienced enough to command such a vast armada from Britain, would be the first Sea Lord. That is what Britain has done. That is how big the fleet they're mobilizing is. Vice Admiral Blue, Charles Cornwall. Unfortunately, he wasn't painted, and that could well be to do with the fact that he dies on his way back home at Lisbon. And Rear Admiral of the Blue. Now, George Naval. Here's the thing. I have put him in the blue because that is what one source has said. But 3 other sources do not list which of the particular orders he is from. So Delaval is a bit of a mystery. But I'm going with the blue. So the British have 3 admirals out there: an admiral of the fleet, a vice admiral, and a rear admiral. All experienced officers. Actually, Admiral of the Fleet George Byng has been very successful at keeping his ships alive in several disasters for the Royal Navy, and even a couple of defeats. So he is out there lusting for glory to justify the position he has. Delaval is poor at this point. He needs money. He needs to capture ships. He has political aspirations, and he wants to restore his family's honor and seat. Their family, the sort of family estate. Neither of which he can do with his current financial scenario. The Spanish commanders. Well, we have Vice Admiral Don Jose Antonio de Gazeta, who is an idiot. I mean, he really is an absolute idiot. How he was made commander. I just presumed the Spanish were really short of admirals. Every worst decision you can make, he makes. And George Camoke, that very, very Spanish-sounding name. Nope. He's of Irish extraction, has served in the Royal Navy for many, many years, decided he wasn't getting the promotions or things which are due to him. He should have been a Vice Admiral or an Admiral of the Fleet, not George. Basically, he is like those officers who turn up when you're dealing with... I can't hear anything on this, so I'm taking this off. Like those officers who turn up when you're dealing with Nelson, who going, oh, well, we should have been in power, we should have been this, we should have been that. Well, what he did about it was he first auditioned for the Russian Navy, and then he auditioned for the Spanish Navy. And he actually seems to be half decent in his job, especially compared to Gazzanetta, because he basically tells Gazzanetta what the exact opposite of every time thing that Gazzanetta does. The guy is an imbecile. Okay, so this is the British ship of the line. Believe it or not, Barfleur is a second rate. A 90-gun ship, and she's considered a second rate. He doesn't have any first rates dispatched with him. Why? Because they have the first rates watching the channel and various other things, and they are expensive. So, there you go, a second rate. But he's got 22 ships of the line, 2 fire ships, 1 store ship, 1 hospital ship, 1 bomb ketch, 1 bomb tender. And those are just the ships of the line. registered listed. And honestly, let's be honest, the Charles Galley 44. It's a 6th rate, I suppose. Maybe a 5th rate if we're being generous. Quite a lot of them are 60s. But then it's got 70s, which are 3rd rates, and the 80s and the 90, which are all 2nd rates. So Barfleur, Shrewsbury, and Dorsetshire, which each have an admiral aboard, because they're the big ships of this operation, and they are going to make people know about it. It's a fairly organised, fairly well-trained, very experienced fleet that he has taken. These are not randomly chosen ships. These are not randomly chosen captains. They are some of the very best the Royal Navy has to offer. He is a former senior naval lord, equivalent of First Sea Lord. Trust me. He knew exactly who was good in the Navy, and as an admiral of the fleet, he could get them. The Spanish ships of the line. Well, I've listed pretty much everything I could find the name of here, including some of the galleys and some of the frigates. Most of the galleys escaped, and there are 2 more galleys which managed to escape, but I couldn't find their names. I'm still hunting them. But you have the thing that Real San Felipe is the flagship is captured by Superb and Kent, blew up after being towed to Mahon, and is a 74-gun ship. Let's see, so she gets captured by Superb and Kent. Let's go down list. Superb, 60-gun. Kent, 70-gun. And actually, it is Superb which takes the lead in that. So theoretically, Superb versus 60-gun versus 74, especially a flagship, should not have been much chance. If you haven't noticed it, there is about 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus 2 more, 11 ships which get away from a force of 28. Again, this is very nice of the Spanish. These are all some virtually new ships in some regards, and the Royal Navy captures them. It's brilliant. Royal Navy size increasing program, courtesy of the Spanish. We need some more ships. Thank you. Have about 10 ships on the line. Yep. 9 of them are captured. It's just no. And some will have fun in that they try to escape to Malta, and then they find that the Maltese are really not as pro them as they hoped. Right, so the Battle of Cape Passaro. The British orders are to dislodge the Spanish from Sicily, so as long as the Spanish fleet is in being around Sicily, the British have failed in their orders. Spanish are in a defensible bay with a strong army at their back and difficult to get into. So, what do you do? Well, if you're Kamok, you say, stay! We can defend this position. If you're Gastata, you go, we must flee! To which Byng goes, chase! The British outnumber them. The Spanish decide to leave their bay and run. The British ships, it turns out, are quicker. Again, they have been sailing. They have only recently been activated. The Spanish ships haven't had a good dry docking on a good cleaning in a while. So it's unsurprising, but also the British ships seem to have more sails at this point. As said, officially, the Spanish fire first. Basically, the fight breaks up. You have the rear of the force being engaged in one direction, the center of the force being engaged in another one, and the front of the force being engaged in another one. And in every single scenario, Byng is able to send more ships and more firepower than the Spanish have there to be able to take care of. Yes, theoretically, if you break up the 22, you have the advantage of reducing their overall strength. But you have 15 and your ships are on average weaker, smaller. It's just. It's no, and no. There has to be a better way. So the results of battle. The thing is, the Royal Navy managed to whip, as I said, the Spanish butts. They got them out, rid of them. It was painful, almost. And, Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor, sends this message to Admiral Sir George Byng. I have received a great deal of joy and satisfaction by the bearer of this, yours of the 18th of August. As soon as I knew you were named by the King as your master to command his fleet in the Mediterranean, I conceived the greatest hopes imaginable from that very circumstance. I'm not sure why, as I said, up to this point, he really hadn't taken part in victories. He hadn't been in command of them, so it hadn't been his fault, and he managed to get his force. But really, I doubt that's the case, but, just the fact that he was such a senior admiral and it was such a big fleet coming is possibly what signified us. The glorious success you have had surpasses, however, my expectations. You have given upon this occasion very singular proofs of your courage, conduct, and zeal for the common cause. I presume that's zeal for the common cause. The glory you obtain from thence is indeed great, and yet my gratitude falls nothing short thereof, for, as Count Hamilton will fully inform you, you may always depend upon the continuance of my thankfulness and affection towards you. May God have you always in his holy keeping. Lovely. What I would add to that is this is a very strange war, the War of the Quadruple Alliance. At one point, there is both a Jacobin landing attempt at a Jacobin landing sponsored by Spain, and technically the Jacobin candidate is leading a French army into Spain to attack Spain on behalf of France. It's just weird, okay? This is a weird war. Britain and France are on the same side. That's just weird enough for starters in the 18th century, let's be honest. Pretty much one of the big lessons of this war was we have great German mercenaries who managed to fight their way through the Spanish lines and reinforce and relieve our allies. Our allies still crumble. Why? Because whilst we send great German mercenaries, they do not believe we are committed to the land campaign. Oh, great. So we need to actually have a bigger, slightly more capable army. And eventually they do get around that. But actually, the Royal Marines get the biggest raising because the Royal Navy gets fed up with the fact that the army's not being able to come out. So the idea is that you raise the Royal Marines and the sailors up, and you can have stronger land forces coming off the ships. The Royal Marines have already been part of the Navy for a while at this point, about a good 60-odd years. But they now start to really sort of emphasize them and strengthen their numbers a bit and all these things. So, summary, and this is a lovely painting of the battle, which is absolutely wrong because honestly, the painting has decided to bring all the battles together when they were all taking part, spread all over the place, because it was a general chase. It was not really a battle. Basically, until the Spanish, I think, and I do think the Spanish started firing first because the whole British trick was dependent upon them firing first, and there being witnesses in terms of lots of people aboard the ships who weren't of British extraction to report and comment on this. But the British did kind of provoke them by charging after them as fast and hard as they could get. And they did. They really did. This was not a battle you wanted to be part of. But it is a battle between what are second, third, fourth, and fifth rates. This is the kind of mixed fleet you really have. A very great example of this period. It's not like the high Napoleonic War period where you get fleets which are composed of third rates and first rates and they're all massive. No. This is the average of the period, which is basically this period, which is a fleet will be composed of whatever ships you can get. It's kind of like the fleets which you'd find on distant stations in the later Napoleonic Wars period, rather than the fleet you find in the Mediterranean normally, which is normally one of the really big premier fleets. And Byng gets involved in a lot of diplomacy after this. He is critical to waging diplomatic war that comes after this. Cornwall unfortunately dies. De Naval. Honestly, Byng gets rid of him as soon as he can to send him home. And then he doesn't ever have another sea command. He did okay for this one, but one of the interesting things is Byng seems to be sending out senior captains as commodores, without calling them commodores, in charge of detached units. But he doesn't seem to trust his rear admiral to go anywhere. Make it out what you will. Perhaps he just thought it sensible to keep the admirals together. Have the command structure there, just in case anything happens to him. But it was an interesting battle with a big impact because it shows both the power of sea power and the limits. Because the power, they were able to sweep the Spanish from the Mediterranean Sea. They secured the Mediterranean. Britain had controlled the sea. Mahan would have been ecstatic. In fact, I'm often surprised Mahan doesn't make more of this battle. When I read his books, he doesn't make more of this battle. This battle is amazing. After it, the Royal Navy have basically said, we now control the Mediterranean. Anyone else want to argue it? No one else has. No one else has a fleet which can even begin to at this point. Arguably, it's at this point that Britain gets control of the Mediterranean and doesn't want to give it up forever after this one. There are some incidents during the Napoleonic Wars, but even after that, even during that, the British do not really want to give up control of the Mediterranean. And as the Italians would say in World War II, they held on doggedly. But I have been talking about Admiral George Byng. And unfortunately, you can't talk about that name in naval history without bringing up the other admiral of that name. In fact, his son, John Byng. And the Battle of Minorca. Okay. So, Minorca. There's a whole dispute on me and the spell check have been having an argument over how to spell that all day. We'll leave that to one side. Well, all day yesterday. So, it is an engagement where Byng thinks he's got terrible ships. He doesn't think he's got good enough sailors. He doesn't think he has enough personnel. He doesn't think the job's really achievable. He keeps sending letters to everyone and all and sundry on his way down that he's going to that this is a thing. It's not impossible to do. For some reason, people get the attitude he's defeated before he even joins battle. He is not an inexperienced commander. He does understand this. He just wants perfection. He wants the fleet his father had at the Battle of Cape Passaro. He's not going to get it. There's a different strategic scenario going on at this point, and Britain has more ships and needs them more places. So it can't provide him with the 22 ships his father had. And basically, there's one ineffectual exchange. Battle of Minorca. I shouldn't recall the battle. If it was by World War II standards, of course, there are battleships there, so of course it would be called a battle. But honestly, if it had happened in World War II by ships below battleship level, they probably wouldn't even remember it had happened. Probably be ignored permanently. Anyway, so we're going to get on to his sentencing, but there is a context. A few years earlier, Lieutenant Baker Phillips, a young officer, second lieutenant on HMS Anglesey, a 40-something gun ship, basically, is under the command of a captain who is an absolute fool. He mistakes. He makes several mistakes. One of them being that the sorry, I'll just turn it gain down. I'm not sure if that's the banging or my voice which has made it go up. And one of the mistakes is he presumes that it's a British ship coming up to him, not a French ship. So he gets caught, and then he does the worst sailing maneuver known to mankind. He manages to flood his lower gun deck, gets himself killed, gets the master killed, and the poor second lieutenant ends up in charge. He's got a ship which is broadly speaking sinking. He's in shock. He's lost all his senior leadership. And he surrenders. And he gets executed for this. And there are quite a lot of outrage at this, because there is presumed that if he'd been his captain or a senior officer, he wouldn't have been executed. He'd been treated differently by the Lords. Senior Lords go, no. Well, Parliament passed an act which has these statements. 10. Every flag officer, captain, commander in the fleet who, upon signal or order of fight, or sight of any ship or ships which it may be his duty to engage, or who upon likelihood of engagement shall not make necessary preparations for fight, and shall not in his own person according to his place encourage the inferior officers and men to fight courageously, shall suffer death on such other punishment as from the nature and degree of the offence a court-martial shall deem him to deserve. And if any person in the fleet shall treacherously or cowardly yield or cry for quarter, every person so offending and being convicted therefore by the sentence of a court-martial shall suffer death. So that's pretty simple. But there's also number 11. Every person in the fleet who shall not duly observe the orders of the admiral, flag officer, commander of any squadron or division, or other his superior officer for assailing, joining battle with, or making defence against any fleet, squadron, or ship, or shall not obey the orders of his superior officer as aforesaid in time of action to the best of his power, or shall not use all possible endeavours to put the same effectually into execution, every person so offending and being convicted therefore by sentence of the court-martial shall suffer death, or such other punishment as from the nature and degree of the offence a court-martial shall deem him to deserve. Number 12. Every person in the fleet who, through cowardice, negligence, or disaffection, shall in time of action withdraw or keep back or not come into the fight or engagement, or shall not do his utmost to take or destroy every ship, which it shall be his duty to engage and to assist and relieve all and every of his Majesty's ships or those of his allies, which shall be his duty to assist and relieve every such person so offending and being convicted therefore by the sentence of court-martial shall suffer death. 13. Every person in the fleet who through cowardice, negligence, or disaffection shall forbear to pursue the chance of an enemy, pirate or rebel, beaten or flying, shall not relieve or assist a known friend in views or to the utmost of his power, being convicted of any such offence by the sentence of court-martial shall suffer death. 14. If when action or any service shall be commanded, any person in the fleet shall presume or to delay or discourage the said action of service upon pretence of arrears of wages or upon any pretence whatsoever, every person so offending, being convicted therefore by the sentence of court-martial, shall suffer death or such other punishment as from the nature and degree of the offence a court-martial shall deem him to deserve. John Byng's aim was to relieve Minorca. It was under siege. He was supposed to land some troops to help the garrison. Admittedly, he hadn't got many from Gibraltar because they were worried about their own siege at this point. But he had troops, had ships. His duty was to fight his way through and reinforce Minorca. He was outnumbered, but not by that many that he shouldn't have been able to, in the minds of many of his peers, fight his way past. It stained his many captains' careers as well who'd served under him. Many of them didn't have good careers after this. In fact, many of them were out of the service quite quickly. Especially the ones who were at his war council and who agreed with his idea to withdraw. So technically, he's said to be in breach of number 10, but the trouble is he also breaches number 12 and to an extent number 13 as far as the law is concerned. This causes a huge outcry because the admirals, etc., do not want to kill him, and they ask for mercy. They ask for many, many things to try and get it out of stop it happening. Clemency from the king and all these things. Doesn't get it. The king doesn't like the prime minister at the time, and so won't listen. So there is Admiral Byng on the Monarch being shot. He was given one nice thing, basically, as in respect of his rank, he was allowed to give the order for his own execution by dropping a handkerchief, and the Marines then fired. Nicholas Rogers, in his book, which I have here, good, useful book, covers the spirit quite well, writes, a culture of aggressive determination which set British officers apart from their foreign contemporaries, and which in time gave them a steadily mounting psychological ascendancy. More and more in the course of the century, and for long afterwards, British officers encountered opponents who expected to be attacked, and more than half expected to be beaten, so that the latter went into action with an invisible disadvantage, which no amount of personal courage or numerical strength could entirely make up for. Yeah. That's the official line. The thing which doomed John was he wasn't his father. His father had won a battle with the odds in his favour, but his father had also never acted like he was going to lose. He was training and drilling those ships from the moment he got them. He wasn't writing off letters complaining about the ships he had. He was writing off letters asking for more ships, but not complaining about the ships he had. There is a difference in tone. An admiral who's asking for more ships versus an admiral who's saying, "You have given me terrible ships. This is not enough. I have not done enough sailors. I have not enough this." Da, 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 da. It sounds like he's defeated before he's begun. This means he has no friends at court. This act had been passed years previously. With much debate in Parliament, there was a majority support for it. Why is it necessary? Well, you could say it's necessary because under the Articles of War, a junior officer like Lieutenant Baker Phillips, who was a second lieutenant, who was in shock and completely unprepared for what happened, can be killed for surrendering his ship. Then an admiral who fails to live up to an even higher standard deserves it as well. Because an admiral you expect more from. An admiral who has a nearly equal size force, a nearly capable, or even if it's just on paper, who has the weather gauge, so can pick and choose his engagement, can choose how he takes on the fight, and actually chooses and makes the decisions which stop them having the fight as close quarters and as in the right advantages to, because he's so fearful of losing ships, shouldn't be in charge. He was actually made admiral by appointment the day before the battle. And then, well, news of the battle really reached the UK. And so that's why he dies as an admiral. But he shouldn't. He was. Minorca wasn't the battle that Picasso was. And it just. Passaro was a battle which was a running engagement against an enemy who was falling apart. But John didn't live up to George. The enemy held together, and he stuck very rigidly to doctrine, line, and he couldn't deliver. He didn't want to make the orders which could deliver in the battle. Could he have won? Could he have lost? But you have to think that even if he had lost, he could have inflicted such damage on the French that they would have had to withdraw from Minorca. And if they'd had to withdraw, then the siege would have basically been effectively over on the British forces. The British could have got stuff through. Worst point, he gets his ships captured by the French. But honestly, if they do, then the French are lumbered with some English ships which suit England. British ships which suit Britain, not which suit France. Considering how much the British had to rebuild the French ships to suit them, God knows how much the French would have had to rebuild a British ship to suit them. Best case, he wins. And he had been drilling his ships every day, but he hadn't seemed to notice the improvements in them. The gunnery levels going up, the ships getting very, very good at sailing, at station keeping, at organization. It's almost like he's doing the right things as a good admiral, but he doesn't even realize he's doing it. And he doesn't gain the faith in his forces because of it. So today, battle at Cape Passaro, a battle without a war, because technically war wasn't declared between Spain and Britain. Even after the battle, it took a few weeks for it to actually be declared. Technically, the British fleet was just out there on a peacekeeping mission. Emerald and Enterprise on Thursday, yes.
hopefully the drilling and all the stuff is over by then. Hopefully, he says. Then, what if Sing Anthony goes hot? Cool, on Monday, next Monday. Battle of Texel. Could Crete have been saved in 1941? The convoy war in perfect storm, and then Mediterranean gunboat diplomacy. It keeps coming back to Mediterranean, doesn't it? Twitter, @AC_naval history, Patreon, and Global Maritime History. Now, I should have mentioned Patreon at the beginning. I should have mentioned Twitter at the beginning. Be really good, nice if you really nice if you would share, subscribe, and like, because as I said, currently YouTube is my income stream. As you know, contract lecturer. Technically, my contracts are over for the year, and I have to hope they are reactivated in October. Normally, I have summer schools. Normally, I have lots of different jobs which fill in summer, and it's great fun, and I get to wander around. This year, of course, none of them are running. So, technically, thanks to COVID and thanks to everyone else, YouTube is my income. But you're all lovely people. So, just please keep watching the adverts. Right. Thank you very much. I hope to see you later for the live when hopefully it'll be cooler. My intention is to have spent quite a large amount of time in probably trying to see if I can turn myself into an ice cube to keep myself cool during the day, but that might not be possible. Thank you. Take care. Have a nice day. See you later.